Hi, Mona. So happy to
Hello,
see
Mariam.
you. All right. So, just to let you know, earlier in the day, we had this session about Northern Nigerian women in leadership. And it was the nicest session I think we've had since Kabafest started this year. In the last Kabafest, I was on the Northern Women Leaders panel, and it was very dramatic. There were arguments, but it's important to say that a lot of the women on that panel were not Kaduna State women. We were from other places, and maybe it just means that the women in Kaduna don't face the kind of challenges because of certain things going on in this state. So, just to let everyone in the audience also know, this panel may not be the nicest that you hope to hear. We are not going to pander to patriarchy. We might say some things that can provoke you, and I think that you should allow it to sit with you, not in a negative way, right? But maybe just critically think about some of the discussions we're going to have today. And I'm going to say a few words, some of the words I found in Mona's book that I thought were interesting for me to open this with. So, quoting Mona now, this book is not a roadmap for making peace with patriarchy. It is a manifesto to dismantle patriarchy and to end its crimes. It is, if we are to save girls, feminism must terrify patriarchy. All right, so Mona, I'm going to come to you to start with some of the questions that I've put together. I wanted to prepare everyone's mind. So, I'm a Northern Nigerian woman with a largely conservative upbringing, and I live in a conservative society. And regardless, your book really spoke to me, and it spoke to me directly, and it was incredibly relatable. When writing The 7 Necessary Sins, did you know it would connect with women globally as it has done so far?
Well, first of all, Mariam, I just want to start the way that I always start my events, which is to introduce myself to everyone and say, hello, everyone. My name is Mona Eltahawy, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, because I want our trans and non-binary friends to feel included in our conversation. And I begin everything with what I call my declaration of faith, which is fuck the patriarchy. And so people will hear me say fuck the patriarchy a lot. And I'm glad you told them that we're not here to be nice to patriarchy, because that's the essence of my feminism. My feminism aims to destroy patriarchy, not to be nice and polite to patriarchy. So when I wrote, and you mentioned, Mariam, that you come from, Northern Nigeria and from a conservative family. So I'm from Egypt. I was born in Egypt to a Muslim family. And I spent half my life in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia. I spent my teenage years in Saudi Arabia. And in fact, I became a feminist in Saudi Arabia. And I think people are surprised when I say I became a feminist in Saudi Arabia, because, Saudi Arabia is one of the most conservative countries in the world. The way it treats women, the guardianship system, and also the ways that Saudi Arabia uses the fact that it is the home to Islam's two holiest sites, the religion from which we both come, and I think most people in the hall are from. Saudi Arabia uses that to basically increase its patriarchy, which I disagree with. So I became a feminist in Saudi Arabia. And as I said, I was born in Egypt, but I also lived in other countries like the United Kingdom and now the United States, and I spent time in Canada. I'm speaking to you today from New York City. So, and I mention all those countries because being global is very important to me. Feminism doesn't belong to white women. Feminism doesn't belong to the United States. Feminism belongs to all of us. And you've read my book, Mariam, so you know that I mention examples of feminists from across the world. I mention many feminists from our continent, our African continent. I mention feminists from Asia, from Latin America, because feminists across the world are fighting to destroy patriarchy. So it was my intention to both show that feminism is transnational and global, and also to speak to that global reader. When people ask me, who is your reader? I say my reader is a feminist wherever they live who wants to destroy patriarchy.
Okay, thank you, Mona, for that introduction. I'm sure people better understand what we're here to talk about today and a little bit more about you. So I want to talk to you about some of the sins, starting with attention. In many societies, especially even in Nigeria, women are trained to take the back seat, stay in the corner, not speak too loudly, not speak too much, and not make mistakes that allow us to grow. What are the key ideas you want to share with women about changing that mindset and getting comfortable with the attention?
Well, I think that one of the quickest ways that patriarchy tries to silence women and girls, and I also include queer people in my book, so people who are non-binary, people who are trans, basically all of us who are hurt by patriarchy. One of the quickest ways that patriarchy tries to silence us and to shrink us is to accuse us of being attention-seeking, as if there's something wrong with wanting attention. And I think this ties in also with ideas of, from conservative cultures and conservative backgrounds, that we must always be modest, that we must always be humble. And these ideas of modesty and humility are never taught to men and boys. Modesty is always something that girls are brought up with, to be quiet, to be nice, to be polite, to be modest, to sit in the corner and not make too much of a fuss. And like you said, not to be loud. But I think that we should be the complete opposite. Now, when I was younger, when people would accuse me of attention seeking, I would say, no, I'm not looking for attention. I just want, to fight against discrimination. And I would make any excuse other than to say, honestly, yes, of course I want attention, because we all deserve attention, because what we're doing deserves attention. So now I tell people, of course I want attention. My ideas are important and they deserve attention. And yes, of course I'm an attention seeker, and you will pay attention to me. So I do this as a form of resistance against this idea that we must be modest. And I'll tell you one of the worst times that this was used against me. So as I said, I was born to a Muslim family and I lived in Saudi Arabia. And when my family moved to Saudi Arabia, I was 15 years old. And very soon after we arrived in Saudi Arabia, we went on Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage, yeah? Everyone there, I'm sure, knows what I'm talking about, the fifth pillar of our religion. We lived in Jeddah and we went to Mecca for the Hajj. And during the pilgrimage, I was 15 years old, and everybody knows that when you go on Hajj, you wear complete hijab, The only thing showing was my face and my hands. That's how all the women were. And I was sexually assaulted twice during pilgrimage, during Hajj. And I wrote about this in my first book, Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And then I wrote about it again on Twitter in February of 2000, I think it was 2018, because a young Pakistani Muslim woman called Sabika Khan went on, I think she went on Umrah or Hajj to Mecca. She was performing, the pilgrimage, and she was sexually assaulted in the Grand Mosque. And she wrote about it on Facebook, and some people attacked her. And so to show support to Sabika, I said, I too was sexually assaulted back in 1982. Sabika was assaulted in 2018. And so I started the hashtag Mosque Me Too. I think people will be familiar with Me Too. The Black feminist Tarana Burke began a social movement called Me Too to fight back against sexual assault against women and girls. So to honor Tarana Burke and also to make space for Muslim women, I started hashtag Mosque Me Too. And initially, I got lots of support from Muslim women who shared their experience. I said, if you are able, please share your experience with sexual assault, either in Mecca, in the Grand Mosque, or in mosques or any Muslim holy sites, because this is something that silence and taboo shames us into not talking about. And as Muslim women, we have the right to fight back against sexual violence in our holy sites, because if we are supposed to be safe anywhere, it should be safe in our holy sites. And so initially, my hashtag went viral and many Muslim women shared their experience. But the number of Muslim men who attacked me and said, you're just attention seeking, made me even more determined to say, yes, I'm seeking attention. Because they were using attention here now and attention seeking to silence what I was saying. And this is why attention is important. And so I said to them, my ideas are important. And what I'm saying here about Muslim women deserving to be free of sexual violence is important. So yes, I seek attention, and you will not silence me through this sin of attention.
Thank you very much. I think it's important for me to share something else from Mona's book. Mona, you talked about how there were two voices of opposition when you shared this story. On one side, there were Muslim people who wanted you to feel like you were making the religion look bad. And then on the other hand, you had like Western, non-Muslim people who tried to use it as an opportunity to make Muslims look bad as well. So like, what is your view on, the fine line between those two groups and how to manage both of those reactions?
Yes, I'm so glad you're asking me this, Mariam, because this is a good continuation, an important and necessary continuation to what I just said. So I think, the position or the challenge sometimes for someone like myself, a feminist of Muslim descent, who writes about these issues. Now, I want to make it very clear that I attack patriarchy wherever it lives. So I say that my first book focused on patriarchy in North Africa and in the Middle East. But the second book, The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls, took my fight against patriarchy all across the world. We talked about how global the examples I used were. So the position that I find myself in, I often say that I am between a rock and a hard place. And the rock is that, those Western people that you mentioned, white supremacists who are Islamophobic, who are racist, who themselves are misogynists. They don't care about women's rights. These are like people who voted for Trump. And, we know what Trump did to women, and we know how they feel about women's rights. We've seen Roe v. Wade, abortion rights in the United States being overturned. So that's on one side of me. And those people want to use my words to make Muslims look bad, like you said. And then the hard place, the other side, is Muslims who, like I said, try to silence me by saying either you want attention or you make us look bad, and you give ammunition to these Western racist Islamophobic types. But we have to remember that these two sides don't care about women. They don't care about women anywhere, especially Muslim women. And what they do is they talk above us, and they don't listen to us, but they basically argue with each other, and they don't care about us. And so my message to both of these sides is fuck you and fuck you, because I will have nothing to do with either one of them. I will never ally with the racists and the Islamophobes. I will never be their friend. They are my enemies. And I will never allow them to use my words against Muslims. And I will never shut up or be silent. And that's why I say fuck you to the Muslim side, because if they cared about women and girls, if they cared about the way we look, they would recognize that it's not me that makes us look bad. It's the men who sexually assaulted me during Hajj who make us look bad. It's the men who stay silent and quiet when they see their friends sexually harass women and girls in public places, whether they're mosques or the street or work or university. So it's important to see these two sides, and it's important to know that I tell both sides to fuck off.
Ooh, thank you. All right. So I'm going to hinge on that and go on to my next question. There has been much noise in Nigeria calling for an end to patriarchy in various parts of our society. I know my name is Mariam, but I'm actually Christian. Though I'm Northern Nigerian, I'm actually Christian, but I still...
I'm sorry, I assumed you were a Muslim, Mariam.
Yes, it happens to me all the time. But I'm Christian, and but however, my name is Mariam, and I have strong traditional Northern values as well. So we had Church 2 in Nigeria, and funny enough, in a previous session, we were talking about over bloated pastors that take advantage of their power within the church. And one of these popular pastors was accused by several women of sexual assault and abuse. And I was one of the people who went to the protest in front of his church during a service. And it was quite an interesting and dramatic event. And I found that even with like other northern Nigerian women, there's this revolution that is beginning where people don't want to continue with the status quo. They want to do things a little differently. And because of that, we're beginning to see a lot of pushback. So in my experience, I find like, especially online, there's a lot of cyberbullying when a female Northern Nigerian especially talks about women's rights or feminism, or even, I've seen it happen to a lot of Muslim women as well. Like when they talk about the rights of a Muslim woman and all of that, they do get attacked. So what kind of sins should we have in mind when dealing with that kind of attack on us speaking about our rights?
Well, those attacks happen everywhere, not just in Nigeria, of course, because, in many countries, what we're seeing is when we challenge powerful men, and when we challenge powerful men who have used their power to either sexually assault us or hurt us in any way, they and their supporters are more interested in silencing us than in holding those men accountable. So that happens everywhere. This isn't just exclusive to Nigeria. And you'll see it again and again. There was Church too in the United States. We've seen what happened with the Catholic Church, with the sexual abuse of children by priests. You've seen it in madrasas in Pakistan and certain areas of Afghanistan, where some of the students also exposed some of the imams in the madrasas. So, you see that there are people who are courageous enough to expose sexual violence and the abuse of power of these men. And then you see, as soon as that happens, that these men have their supporters who come to attack us because they're more interested in silencing us. And that can be very difficult. I understand it can be very difficult, and not everyone wants that kind of fight or cyberbullying, like you said. But we have to also understand that whether we speak out or not, as Audre, the Black feminist, the Black lesbian feminist, Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you. So whether we're silent about it because we don't want to be attacked, or whether we fight back, we're still going to be hurt by patriarchy, because patriarchy is interested in consolidating its power. So I think that the way that we can continue to fight back is to find power with ourselves, because I've seen it where it happens with, I've seen Northern Nigerian women who were either arrested because they took part in some protest, I think it was Ariwa, and other protests that happened in Northern Nigeria. I can't remember the actual hashtags, but then I saw that some women were being picked for specifically and targeted, and then other women came to their support, and sometimes other men too. And this is what we must start to do more and more, or continue to do more and more, because it has been happening, to find strength in community, where when we see someone being attacked, we should go and show them solidarity and stand with them and say, I support so-and-so, and I understand that she's been targeted right now, but I want her to know she's not alone.
Okay, thank you, Mona. Your book sparked some welcome controversy in the feminist discourse globally. And to quote you, you say the bootlickers or foot soldiers of patriarchy get more upset at imaginary violence against men rather than actual day-to-day violence against women and girls and gender diverse people. It's clear that I think somehow as a society, we've kind of normalized it when a woman is violated in some way. But when it's the other way around, like the kind of shock that I've seen when a woman has killed her husband, because this happened in Northern Nigeria a few years ago. There was this one huge case, and the outrage was what I would have expected, to hear when women are killed, and then women are killed regularly. Also, we've seen even a celebrity in Nigeria called Osinachi who was killed by her husband while he was physically abusing her. So my question here is, how do you think also this needs to be addressed, right? Because there's this sense of like it's normal when women are abused or insulted, and even yesterday there was a lot of discussion about it online with a real public figure. People tend to excuse it when it happens to women, but when it's with men, it's taken a little bit more seriously. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that's absolutely horrendous. And that's why one of the chapters in my book is violence, in the sins. Because, I list it's 7 sins, and one of them is violence. And obviously, I don't think these are sins. As I say in the beginning, in the introduction to my book, I believe that these are things that we must do to destroy patriarchy. And so what I do in my chapter that I think upset a lot of people is that I ask questions that are very uncomfortable, but necessary questions. So I ask things like, how many men must we kill? Must we kill until men stop killing women, How many rapists must we kill until men stop raping women? Now, I'm asking these questions. I'm not saying go out there and rape men or kill men. I'm not saying go out there and kill a man every day, but I do ask, how many men must we kill every day? 10? 100? 1,000? How many until patriarchy is shaken enough that it says, okay, enough, let's negotiate, like they do with wars, Yeah. Because I say very clearly that there's been a war against women and girls and gender diverse people since the beginning of time. So what happens now if we declare war against patriarchy? And, this became very obvious. How uncomfortable this is became very obvious when I asked those questions on a live TV show in Australia in 2019. And, Australia is a democracy, And some viewers were very upset by my questions, and they complained to the network, and the network banned this episode. So, we don't often think that democracies censor their media or ban their media, but Australian television banned, they censored this TV episode, and it's never been broadcast again, even though it should be rebroadcast and it should be on their website. So it's very clear that people get very upset, like you said, when I talk about imaginary violence against men, and not upset enough when it's actual violence. And this, what happened over the past 2.5 years during lockdown in various countries around the world should really make people sit down and ask the same questions that I'm asking. Because while there was a virus outside, this COVID-19, right, the global pandemic, we were told to stay at home so that we don't catch COVID-19. Those of us who are lucky enough to be able to stay at home, because some people could not stay at home. It's a big privilege to stay at home. The amount of violence against women and girls around the world spiked by at least 30% during lockdown, during a global pandemic. This is why I say fuck. This is why I say fuck the patriarchy. This is why I ask the difficult questions. This is why I want to know how many men must we murder until men stop murdering us? Because even during a global pandemic where we were stuck at home so that we don't go outside and die from COVID-19, men were beating us and killing us at home. So I want people to ask these difficult questions now. And you will know that in my book, I answered the question for myself about sexual violence when I beat up a man who sexually assaulted me. And I beat this man up, and I'm glad I beat this man up, and I would beat him up again because I want him next time he goes to a club and thinks that he can sexually assault a woman, I want him to remember the night that Mona beat him up in February 2018, so that he thinks, maybe if I sexually assault this woman, she's going to beat me up like that woman beat me up in 2018.
Great. So I'm just going to read out some of the statistics I found in your book about the United Kingdom. So it talks about 139 women who were killed. And this is like a breakdown of the statistics. So 105 of them knew their killer. 64 of them were killed by a current or former intimate partner. We see a lot of intimate partner violence that is not often talked about. 30 were killed by strangers, with 21 killed in terrorist attacks. That's also a hot topic at Kabafest this time because of the women who have been attacked and killed because of terrorism here. And then 17 were killed by a male family member, including 10 who were killed by their own son. So I think this is, these are shocking statistics that people sometimes think when you say, how many men do we have to kill? They don't understand that these are the numbers that are already existing for women. And it's way more in a country like South Africa, for example. So just to share that with the audience. In the chapters about power and ambition, I want to talk about power and ambition because it's been a theme here as well. In the chapters about power and ambition, you make some connections between governance, politics, and women's equality. I think your feminism is intersectional, and that's clear enough. So you point out the importance of women not committing the same atrocities as men, especially when they're in places of power in government. Right now, Nigeria has an abysmal representation of women in government. I think Kaduna is one of the exceptions, though. There is clamor for affirmative action, allocating seats to women in the parliament and in government, like automatically. And so, do you think this will provide a win for women in the long run or a loss?
Right, I will answer your question, Mariam, but I just wanted to say something about the statistics that you mentioned earlier that you read from my book, because it ties into what I said about lockdown and home. And also what we spoke about earlier about, this idea of modesty and humility and the conservative argument that women should stay at home more because this is where they belong and they're safer at home. I think those statistics and the numbers that you read about the UK, they are basically, you can apply them around the world. Because I think people have this false notion that the most dangerous people for women and girls are strangers. We have this phrase, stranger danger. Whereas in fact, and the United Nations has documented this, the most dangerous place for women and girls is the home. And I think people are shocked when they find this out. The most violence against women and girls is committed against them by men they know. Most sexual violence against women and girls, rape, sexual violence, groping, any of that, is men they know. And that's really important because I know the arguments. Like I said, I lived in Saudi Arabia and I was born in Egypt. I know the arguments that conservative cultures make where they say women should stay at home because that's the safest place for you. And when we talk about violence against women, they say this is exactly why you should stay at home. And that's why I talked about violence against women and girls during lockdown. Home is the most dangerous place for women and girls because the most violence committed against women and girls is by men they know. So we have to remember this. And this is why we have to stop talking about what women and girls should do to be safe, i.e., stay at home, cover up, don't go out at night. And we have to talk more about what men should not do against women and girls. And we have to put the onus on men. Men should stop killing us. Men should stop raping us. Men should stop hurting us. The focus should be on them rather than on us. But now let's to go to your power and ambition question. I am less interested in having women in government and women as presidents and prime ministers, and I'm more interested in having feminists in positions of power. Because when we look at the UK right now, they now have their third female prime minister, Liz Truss, and the two who came before her, Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher, and again, this is in a democracy, yeah? All of these three women are from the Conservative Party and they are not feminists. They're not feminists by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't subscribe to the argument that we just need more women in power. No, we need more feminists in power. Because these three women who have been prime ministers in the UK were women who did the work of patriarchy. And not just any kind of patriarchy, wealthy, able-bodied, white supremacist patriarchy. And to further enlarge my argument, in the UK now, when you look at the four most powerful positions in the government in the UK, so that's the Prime Minister, the Interior, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So basically that's the Minister in charge of Home Affairs, the Minister in charge of Foreign Affairs, and the Minister in charge of the Economy, and Liz Truss. None of them is a white man. So some people have been looking at this and saying, this is historic. But if you look at the political positions, so Liz Truss is a white woman, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the person in charge of the British economy, is a black man. The person in charge of foreign affairs for the UK, I believe, is a woman of color. And also the Home Secretary is a woman of color. But we have to go beyond this. They're not white men. Because when we look at the political positions of these four most powerful people in the British government, we will see that they are working for the benefit of white men. So what now have I achieved in just looking at this superficial identity of these people and saying, this is a historic time for the UK? I am interested in people in positions of power who will dismantle the power of white men, who will dismantle the power of patriarchy, not people who are what I call foot soldiers of the patriarchy. So that's why in my chapter on power, I challenge people to think about power differently. I am interested in people who use power to destroy patriarchy, not to do the bidding of patriarchy.
Thank you so much. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of reactions from the audience, but you guys are going to have your time to ask Mona questions. So I'm not done yet. Okay, so in the conclusion of the book, you talk about great examples of women who sinned successfully. And again, I see a lot of sinning here in Nigeria happening. Some examples of the sinners that we see are Indicato, who has a very outspoken voice. She plays a part in politics as well, very strong feminist. And another controversial figure, I would say, is Fakriya. And you know Fakriya. I think you know Fakriya, yes. So that's another controversial figure in a lot of the conversations right now. With all of these sins, what sin do you think is the most important one for women who are sinning successfully and for others who want to do the same?
Well, you know, I would challenge the use of the word controversial about, you know, Fakriya and other women, you know, because Fakriya and I were in conversation at Arke, you know, in 2019. You know, we talked about my book then. And I think that the use of this word controversial is problematic. You know, we have to ask, you know, what is controversial about saying, I want to destroy patriarchy? What is controversial about exposing the crimes of patriarchy? So it's the same as I said, you know, we have to stop telling women and girls what they must do in order to be safe from violence, whether it's sexual violence or other forms of violence, and start telling men what they should not do. And it's the same with controversy and this word controversial. I want us to start, because, you know, we use this word controversial to basically malign women who have the daring and courage to say, I'm challenging patriarchy. I now want us to start maligning men and those who uphold patriarchy and put the onus on them, you know? So I think Fakriya and other women, they're not controversial. They're heroes. They're courageous. They're role models. You see what I'm saying? When we use more positive language, we shift the focus away from the bad things, quote unquote, that they're doing and make it obvious that they're doing good things. These are role models. I want these negative connotations instead to be put on the men or the women who uphold patriarchy, not those of us who are challenging patriarchy. So in terms of the sins that I think are the most important, I mean, I've chosen the 7 that I believe are the most important, Mariam. This is why I wouldn't choose among them. But I will tell you, though, that I've arranged them in order of difficulty and power. So, or like impact, not power, because one of them is power. So I begin with anger. And sometimes people think anger is just the beginning and the end. Anger is the baby sin, you know? So I begin with anger, and then I go to attention, and then I go to profanity, which is why I say fuck a lot. And then I go to ambition, and then I go to power, and then I go to violence, and I end with lust. And as I said, this is an increasing order of difficulty and impact. And I end with lust because I believe that when we talk about sex and we talk about queerness and we talk about all of those things that I discuss in my chapter on sex, I believe they form the heart of the challenge to patriarchy, because they scramble the signals of what patriarchy tells us is a good woman or a good girl and a modest woman and all of the things that we should not do. So all of the other sins, we build on them until we get to lust, which I believe is the hardest, but also the most impactful in challenging patriarchy.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Mona. So I think I'm going to try to round up so we can get questions from the audience. So I'm just going to ask you one last question. Kaduna, just to give context, Kaduna has a mixed representation of Christians and Muslims. Your book talks about sins, and there's also like a lot of profanity, especially, yes, there's a chapter on profanity, and I see it on your social media as well. So are you worried about the message getting missing in the profanity?
Not at all. Like, I said the chapter on lust is at the end because it's the hardest and the most impactful. And I intentionally say things like, what does that mean? And this ties into profanity in the message. When people ask me things like, what is the sexual revolution and why is lust so important? And why is profanity important to my message? I basically answer all of those by saying, the sexual revolution basically is, I own my body. And when I own my body, it means that it belongs to me, not to the state, not to the mosque or the church, not to my family. But it also means that I fuck who I want, when I want, with their consent. Now, when I say that, a lot of people go, oh my God, Mona said fuck, And oh my God, Mona's talking about fucking. And, they're shocked and they like giggle and they like sometimes, get offended and walk out or whatever. And I don't care, because what I do care about is now I'm a writer, and I know how to use words and I use my words intentionally. So when I say it is my right to fuck who I want, when I want, obviously with their consent, because consent is important, I understand what I'm doing. I understand that I'm making people uncomfortable and I want to make people uncomfortable. And I don't believe that dilutes my message. What I think it does is it forces people to ask, why am I more offended at Mona saying fuck than at what she is saying fuck against? Because when I say fuck the patriarchy, are you more offended at the fact that I said fuck when you should be offended at patriarchy and its crimes? And if you are more offended at my use of the word fuck, then there's something wrong with you and you benefit from patriarchy. And if you're more offended when I say I fuck who I want, when I want, and you stop there and you just get lost at the fuck, I want you to unpack and ask why that makes you uncomfortable and why is it that you don't want to continue the conversation about consent, about sexual freedom, about the sexual revolution, and about the importance of owning my body, especially for women, girls, and queer and gender expansive people. So I understand what I'm doing when I say those things. I use language very deliberately and I want to make people uncomfortable. And I say to them, if you're uncomfortable, it means that your privilege is being challenged. So sit in that discomfort and ask yourself, why am I uncomfortable? And challenge yourself to continue with the conversation to get to consent and sexual freedom and patriarchy and its crimes. Because I guarantee that patriarchy and its crimes are much more offensive than Mona Eltahawy saying, I fuck who I want when I want.
Yes, I agree with you, Mona. So I think that is a good note for me to end my own interview. I hope that people in the audience are able to sit with the challenge. I can tell from the reactions in the room that people have been challenged. So I want to take questions.
Hello, good evening, ma'am. Good evening, all. It's not a question, it's a contribution rather. And I would love to address women in this room. You see, we in this hall, we enough to build second generation of Kaduna population in the next few decades. The women in this room, actually. I don't know, I can't say how many we are, but I believe we can produce more of maybe 30 of what is here in the next decade. So why should we wait for men or the society should decide how we feel about all this gender-based violence that we are facing? We shouldn't wait for them to decide or help. Because as a matter of fact, we give birth to the population. The populace. We shouldn't wait for them to decide. That stigma, we should really work on it ourselves. And it starts from home, as she said earlier. She did mention earlier. Girl child, mothers, aunties, mother-in-laws, we should train our young girls to be bold enough to speak out, to be bold enough to say what's going on in their mind without any fear. This is what we actually lack. A girl can be abused by her own relatives. Meanwhile, as a mother, you're in that room. You are in that house without any remorse. We're being trained to be shy, to be quiet. I feel it's high time we change the narrative. It's high time we teach our young girls to be bold enough and fearless. We give birth to this population. So why should we wait for men? Why should we wait for men to support us?
Thank you so much. Mona, do you want to say something to that?
Yes, I want to salute her and I want to send her my love and solidarity. You're absolutely right. Everything. I'm sitting here clapping for you because everything you say is right. That is exactly the spirit of my book. This is why I say we must terrify patriarchy. I want every man to be terrified of the idea that if he touches a woman without her consent, he will break his hand. I will break his hand if he touches me without my consent. This is what I mean by terrifying patriarchy. So sister, I salute you.
My name is Abdulrashid Nasir Metabarimi. So for my own, it's not actually a question because I don't even understand, let's say, firstly, I'm not a misogynist and I'm not against women's rights or what have you. But my question to you is that I don't actually understand the kind of message you are trying to pass. Is it a kind of advocacy or a kind of indoctrination? If it is advocacy,
What are you asking me? Hold on, I didn't ask what you asked me something. Is it a kind of what?
Advocacy or a kind of indoctrination?
Advocacy or indoctrination? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I will answer you. This is very easy. First of all, I have to tell you something. Whenever a man says to me, wait. Whenever a man says to me, I'm not a misogynist, but I immediately assume he's a misogynist. So I have to tell you.
Okay?
You
see, listen, please.
So you've already got off on the wrong foot with me. So
I don't. Your question. I understand where you're coming from, but here is my question.
No, you already asked me a question. You said, "Is this advocacy or indoctrination?" I tell you what this is. This is a campaign or a revolution, whatever you want, to destroy patriarchy. So if you're asking me, is feminism brainwashing? If this is what it takes to destroy patriarchy, I am happy to brainwash everybody. Is this a revolution that needs advocacy? I am happy to have
Okay.
I don't really care what it is. What I do.
Okay, so my question is quite personal, but when you think about sexual abuse, what's your first emotion?
About sexual abuse?
Yes, what's your first emotion? What pops up immediately?
Well, what pops up immediately now is because I'm now 55 years old and I've had years of fighting back right now is I want to kill a man who sexually abuses anyone. I am ready to kill a man. That's where I am right now. But I have to tell you, it took me years to get to this situation because we're not socialized to fight back. But like I said, I beat up a man in a club, you know? So my message now is, if you touch me without my consent, I will break your hand.
Good evening, Mona. I was expecting you to give me a brief definition of feminism and patriarchy you've been talking about. That's first, a brief definition of what it means. The answer you're going to give me will determine actually the real question I want to ask.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. It's very easy. So, and I'm glad you asked me this question actually, because I usually define them during my discussion. So now is an opportunity. Feminism is the destruction of patriarchy. And what is patriarchy? I want you to imagine an octopus. You know that creature, the octopus? And the head of the octopus is patriarchy. And each one of the 8 tentacles is what we call the oppressions that patriarchy uses. Because the textbook definition of patriarchy is a system of oppressions that privileges male dominance. And often that people don't really visualize that. So I use the octopus to help you understand that. So the head of the octopus is patriarchy, and each one of the tentacles is one of those oppressions that patriarchy uses to privilege male dominance. So one of them is misogyny, which is the hatred of women. One of them, I believe, is white supremacy or racism. Another one is capitalism, because we have to talk about race, class, and gender. Another one is ableism, because we have to talk about the way that patriarchy uses its oppressions against disabled people. Another one is homophobia or transphobia. So each one of those, like I said, is a form of oppression that patriarchy uses to privilege male dominance. Because when I think about who most benefits from patriarchy, it's that man who benefits from all of these oppressions. So it would be a cisgender, heterosexual, wealthy, able-bodied, conservative man. And in a country like the United States, it would be white men. I imagine in the room, if I were there right now, it would be the majority of men. So basically, my feminism, if I were in the room right now with you in Kaduna, I would say my feminism wants to destroy all the oppressions that the men in this room use to continue to benefit from life.
My question is, what do you have to offer as a feminist when you get the power you're talking about? And regarding this patriarchy, you've been talking about destroying them. Don't you think you are being a little bit unfair? Because this abuse and toxicity have no gender. Why are you setting double standards? It has no gender. Females can be dangerous just like the males. So I don't think there's any point here. Because women abuse men, women rape men, and women murder men. So why are you being particular about the men?
Listen, Aisha, you have not read my book. And if I were there, I would give you a book as a gift from me to you, okay? Let's unpack what you just said. If we look at the statistics, the number of men who abuse women compared to the number of women who abuse men is the difference between night and day. It is a massive difference. So there's no similarity there whatsoever. However, and also the number of women who rape men versus the number of men who rape women, I'm laughing. Come on now. Come on, Aisha. Come on, let's be realistic, okay? You are deliberately asking a question just to be scandalous, okay? Your question has no basis in reality. The statistics do not support you. However, I will tell you one thing in which I'm willing to have a conversation with you. And I mentioned this in my book, which is why I want you to read my book. I said, in response to the question before you about patriarchy, I said, a system of oppressions that privileges male dominance. There are some women who benefit from patriarchy. Now, if you want to talk about women who benefit from patriarchy, this is a discussion I'm willing to have with you. I call them the foot soldiers of patriarchy. And they are not my friends, okay? But that is very different than saying women rape men and women murder men. No, 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 no. The statistics do not support what you're saying. This is an argument that men use to silence feminism. And then you said to me, what benefit am I going to bring with my feminism? This is what my feminism will bring, Aisha. It will bring freedom. It will bring liberation. It will set you free from the fuckery and the shit of patriarchy.
Good evening from Kaduna, Nigeria. On behalf of the men in this hall, I want to...
Uh-oh. On behalf of the men in this hall, this is a big one now.
Okay. I want to let you know that here in Nigeria, women kill men. Yes, we had series of events couple of months back where women kill men. Wives kill their husbands.
Yeah, and hold on. I'm going to stop you here.
For your question.
Wait. Hold on. These women who killed their husbands, did they wake up in the morning suddenly and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to murder my husband today. Or was this a man who was abusing them for years? Come on, please now. Let's be realistic, okay?
Okay, and for your question that you said that, how many men do you have to kill to destroy patriarchy? I just have a suggestion for that. Why not you just stop giving birth to the men?
Okay, thank you. I did not plan to say anything. Excuse me, I'm speaking to you. You said how many that women also kill women. But just this morning, it was trending on Twitter and it is still trending. A man killed a lady simply for rejecting his proposal. And that is not the first, second, or third. So don't tell me that women kill men too. Men kill women for nonsense reasons and fairly, very, very little reasons. For things as bare as not accepting proposals.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ishak Shehu. My own were some observations and a question at the end of it. Sometimes the greatest evil can come from the best of intentions. So I was worried about the language and the approach of extending this message. I really wished that I've studied this book to know what these 7 sins are before talking. But then, look, I come from a community, from a state whereby opportunities were given to both men and women so that the society will thrive. And this society is thriving perfectly. She asked you a question earlier that, aren't you worried that your message can be misunderstood? And if I remember, you responded with some fuck like 3 times.
That's correct.
So we don't want to create a chaotic revolution. And I think I will read the book and then I will suggest writing another book to guide these women to know, yes, we are in a society where we live with no bounds, but we should consider morals, compassion, and other things.
Okay, look, this is my response to you. I really wish I was in the room live. It's very easy when you have all the privileges to sit there and say, you know what, I really worry about chaos. And I really worry about where this is going. And I really think you should be more polite. And I really think you should be more compassionate, because you are not directly impacted by the things that I write about in my book. And that several of the women, not the one who said women rape men, but the other women, we directly face the oppressions and the crimes of patriarchy every day. So it's very easy for you to say, you know, you should just be a bit quieter. Just like Mariam said at the beginning, you should be a bit more polite. The reason I say fuck is because I am done with being nice and polite. We tried nice and polite for a really, really long time. And men like you still did not listen. So how did I get men like you to listen? When I said fuck. So if you don't like my message, I have to tell you, that's too fucking bad. Because my message is not for you. Because you have all the privileges in the world. My message is for the people who are done You know, like Lizzo says it's about damn time. It's about damn time to destroy patriarchy. So my book and my fuck is for those of us who are impatient with your politeness and your morals and your compassion, because none of those morals and compassion were given to us. And so we are told, be beaten, be raped, be murdered. But please, when you try to liberate yourself, please don't say fuck. So I guarantee to you that the next book I write will have even more fucks.
Don't worry, you tried.
Okay. Good evening, ma. Please, I just want to address this guy that said something about statistic of, the stat about women abusing men. Please, I want to ask you can check it up online. The rate at which women and men to women violence happen and women to male violence happen are actually very, very different. You can have, like, before you hear a woman raping a guy or sexually assaulting a guy, like one times before you hear a guy the other way around. Like, and the way the society approach to it is very, very different. Like in my area, there was a rape case. Actually, they caught the guy red-handed. So the elders were like hush-hush about it, that they don't want it to get out because of the girl, all about that. And in that same area, there were people that came to marry the girl, and the community was saying like, she was being raped, she's the damaged tomatoes and all those. And in that same area, the guy still got married. So what are you saying? It is very, very unfair on women. The way they handle rape against women and the way they handle rape against men are two different things. So what you are trying to advocate here is the approach. If what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. The way they do for men, they should also fight for women the same way. That's what we are advocating for. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As I said, the statistics make it clear that there is much more violence by men against women than by women against men. It's obvious.
Hello, my name is Mustafa Terry, and I have one simple question. Why is the quest for women's freedom, why is that a threat to the male gender? If you feel like, okay, yes, there are women that hurt men, there are women that assault a man. If you feel like that's wrong, and of course it's wrong, start your own movement and fight for their freedom. We are not stopping you. But the basic fact is that women are more victims of gender-based violence than men. And we are not stopping you from fighting for the men, but what we are saying is allow us to fight for the women. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Musa.
All right.
And I want to add to what you said, Musa, by reminding men in the hall that patriarchy hurts men too. You know, patriarchy hurts men as well in different ways than it hurts women. But you're absolutely right. If you want to help go out there and support men, do it. But remind the men as well that patriarchy hurts them in various ways. Yeah. So let's understand that patriarchy is the enemy to most of us.
All right, I don't think the questions around this are ever going to end because this is a continuous conversation anyway. But I just want to say thank you so much to Mona. Let's hear it from Mona for an amazing session.
Rock